Command, send reinforcements. Star Command, do you copy?
I don't understand.
In this diorama tutorial, I thought I would attempt to face my childhood fears. How, you ask? By recreating them, of course, with foam, styrene, paint, and hot glue. And I'm going to show you how you can do it too. I don't know about you, but my traumas as a childhood often carried over into my dreams and nightmares, and they often took the form of a Xenomorph. I think I was about 8 years old the first time I saw the Xenomorph, formerly known as Big Chap, and it fascinated and excited me just as much as it frightened me. This diorama pays homage to my love of concept and set design in film, and the nightmares that it sometimes fueled for me. But more importantly, it's a testament to the heroes of our dreams who venture into the unknown in a selfless way to face the monsters. More on that later. I always start any new diorama with a concept sketch to make sure my ideas have form and shape that makes some level of sense. For this diorama, my goal was to emulate a sort of hallway to nowhere vibe that would make you feel uncertain about where you were heading and where you came from, just like you might feel in a dream. I outlined a plan of the final layout on graph paper that essentially ended up being what I thought was the most compelling idea from that. I wanted to create a claustrophobic feeling for the figures when they were inside the hallway. This is a 1/6 scale diorama for 12-inch tall figures, so I went with a 14-inch starting height. This diorama's main base material is expanded polystyrene insulation foam, sometimes known as XPS or EPS insulation foam, which you can find around the roofing section of most hardware stores. If you don't have any of this material easily accessible near you, I would recommend reaching out to a local construction company and asking them where they get their hard insulation foam from, and they might be able to direct you where to get some or even offer you some of the scraps from their build. I cut my base out with a metal T-square and extendable box cutter and drew my floor plan out with the help of a speed square and permanent marker. I pre-cut foam at 14-inch heights using this same method and marked where the wall widths would need to be cut using the floor plan as a guide, and also marked the 45-degree angles I would need to remove from the edges to get a proper intersection according to my drawings. I achieved the angled edges by carefully pulling the foam through my hot wire cutting table's wire blade. You can achieve this angle cut using an extendable box cutter and metal ruler and refine your cut with some 120 grit sandpaper, but the hot wire cutting table is definitely cleaner and faster. If you plan on working with foam for a large scale project or multiple projects, I definitely recommend investing in a hot wire foam cutting table. There's multiple brands, they all do the same thing, Proxxon, Hercules, whatever. There's a link below for the one I use in this video, as well as most of the other tools and materials. I then secured those wall sections together using my favorite foam glue up method of all time, which consists of spreading a liberal amount of EPS glue and then using hot glue in strategic spots to act as a quick tack weld to hold things in place immediately, while the EPS glue dries slow and strong to secure it all over time. I secured the angles of those walls by aligning them to my cutting mat's grid and then pinned them at those angles using the minimally invasive sewing pins method that I discovered many moons ago. I remember when I used to visit Universal Studios during the summer with my Uncle Bob and my dad, and there was a store there that had a full-size foam Xenomorph replica. And I used to want to go to that store because it was there, but also at the same time I used to get freaked out and paranoid and not want to make eye contact with it because I was scared it was going to suddenly jump up and start chasing me. I wanted to capture the essence of those types of feelings I remember feeling when I was young, and also show the almost naive sense of childlike selflessness that a hero like Buzz Lightyear, let's say for instance, might have to be willing to venture into the unknown and end up in a situation like we're dreaming here. I'm curious about you though. Are there any fears that you still live with that have carried over from your childhood? Leave a comment below. I'd be really interested to hear what you guys have to say. To create the hallway footing and crown moldings, I set my fence step to cut some foam lengths and then trimmed the lengths into more manageable sizes. I drew out some trapezoidal shapes directly onto that foam and sliced them out while keeping the foam stacked using my hot wire cutting table. One of the advantages of the hot wire table. This resulting shape will act as a buttress for the walls and structural edge to attach the footings and crowns onto. What the heck is a buttress? Buttresses are basically engineering or architectural elements that help hold up and support a wall. After buttressing as hard as I possibly could, I took my foam buttresses and sliced them in half to double the amount of buttressing I had available to me and glued them in place. I moved on to creating the footing and crown faces by cutting foam lengths to the proper width to fit onto the trapezoidal buttress supports and then slice the lengths in half to slim them down. Optionally, you can save time by using foam that is already 1/2 inch thick like I did for some of these parts. There is a link below to buy pre-cut pieces in that thickness if you need some. I shaped those faces and cut the angles to intersect properly by pinning them in place, looking downwards and marking the dividing line from the wall's edge across the pinned foam face and then slicing that off at an angle with the help of a metal ruler as a safety edge. This is definitely a bit tricky because you need to trust your eyesight to divide an obtuse angle in half, but if you get it down, it goes pretty quick. For me, it was 16 cuts in total. After cleaning up those cuts and making sure the flat faces intersected cleanly, I moved on to making a layer of trim to act as a cap for the footers and crowns and followed the same procedure regarding fitting the corners together, but added the step of softening the edges by slicing off the corner and then sanding it smooth with 120 grit sandpaper. When planning this diorama, I realized the soft white padded walls you often see inside of space stations, whether built by NASA or designed in a film set, have the deceptive quality of being both soft and protective due to their rounded, calming, pillow-like shapes, and at the same time having a kind of oppressive nature like the padded walls of an insane asylum, resulting in subconscious conflicting feelings that make you feel like you might be in a dream. I removed the footing and crown faces and cut out L's, squares, and rectangle sections from them and strategically rounded them over to get that soft pillow vibe. I then scored some additional detail lines to look like they were designed as overlay panels that were meant to fit together snug. These were glued in place, and then I began echoing the same theme on the open wall spaces left in between the footers and crowns with rounded edge foam lengths and slim panel line cuts. I did all this while keeping in mind the idea of regular shapes, but layered out in an inconsistent way. This was to achieve the feeling of something technical and engineered, but unfamiliar and consistent. So it was slightly off. Again, like a dream might be, somewhat undefined. Once I had the profile of the hallways finalized, I was able to start making the bulkheads. I simply slid a sheet of poster board into the slit between the wall intersections and traced the profile of the shape I had created with a Sharpie. I cut out and retraced that profile onto a piece of cardboard so I had a permanent reference if needed. Then I cut out another one using my favorite material, expanded sheet styrene 1/8 of an inch thick, using a small box cutter and metal ruler. I checked the fit to make sure I had the profile cut out correctly, and then got some thin sheet styrene and sliced some 1/4 inch wide strips. I cut 3 more bulkheads and then superglued the strips onto the outer facing edge of the bulkheads to create a welded structural beam sort of look. With the bulkheads acting as a spacer, I glued on the footer and crown pieces and checked the current progress against my original drawing. I also used Boba Fett as a stand-in and realized the diorama should be a little wider to make the airlock door more proportional to the rest of the diorama, so I added 1.5 inches to the width. The flooring is done by cutting a whole sheet of 1/8 inch thick expanded styrene the size of the entire base and then demarcating a panel pattern that follows the shape of the hallway in pencil. Pencil is best for this because it can be erased off styrene easily and won't bleed through the paint like ink would on styrene. After deciding on a panel line layout that I liked, I committed to it by scoring it all in with a metal ruler and extendable box cutter for subtle, sharp lines. I painted the floor with a base coat of flat black and then 2 layers of green and 1 gray, all spray paint. Then I came back and burnished the paint back off to make it look like an old walked-on hard surface. Burnishing in this case is achieved by pouring denatured alcohol on the hard surface and also getting some on a microfiber cloth and rubbing to effectively smear and remove simultaneously random spots of paint to simulate age from slow progressive wear. I wanted the space station to look vintage futuristic, but also feel like it itself was old, like seriously old, as if this research station had been used by 2 or 3 generations of technicians in space for 150 years, and was now derelict, adding to the ominous, uncertain, dreamlike vibes. I had recurring dreams about the alien growing up, and it wasn't until I was about 13 years old that one night I came face to face with the alien in my dream. I actually distinctly remember mustering up the courage and punching it in the face. It backed away out of my dream, never to be seen again. Thank God for testosterone and puberty. After spray painting the bulkheads black, then dark brown, I painted the walls with 3 layers of pewter gray acrylic paint. I chose this pewter gray because it achieved its grayness from its green tints. I feel this station needed to have organic color undertones in the paint schemes, like something rotting. The green tones would provide a mild organic feel like that. After this, I reassembled the diorama to make sure I was on the right track. Using all the same techniques and materials described thus far, I made the airlock door. You may also notice the shape that occurs as a result of the hallway wall profiles around the airlock is nearly a stereotomic-like trace of a human face. Top of head, ears, jawline. So I chose to roll with that and place a viewing window where the left eye might be and a little curve up detail where the right side of the mouth might be, if that was in fact a head shape. This kind of felt right to me since dreams are in our heads. With 3 layers of acrylic paint protecting the foam, I could safely apply the next color, which was Heirloom White Spray Paint by Rust-Oleum, which I selected because I felt like it looked like freshly cleaned bone. After coating all the walls with bone, I then came back and colored in select areas with a thin coat of pewter gray to give a moldy, worn look to the paneling. I also wiped off and lightly burnished some of the new pewter gray paint before it dried to add a worn out look. I also combined the pewter gray with water as a wash and applied it to the white areas and wiped away the excess to create an almost humid accumulation of the green tinted gray, thus adding to the contradictory nature of this piece in that it was mechanical regular forms, but arranged in an irregular pattern and painted with neutral colors that also have a rotting organic undertone to them, all pushing towards that unsettling dream state I keep mentioning. I sketched the company logo on some graph paper and cut out a stencil from it. I pinned the stencil down where I wanted it and used a sponge in a very intentional perpendicular dabbing motion up and down to apply the paint inside the stencil lines. The stencil was removed and I also wiped off excess paint there for a worn logo look. Once again, using all the same techniques just demonstrated, I built a ceiling and added some wire and dowel rods to get some subtle conduit details to build out the interest of the piece a little further. On the ceiling, I used my hot wire cutter to remove a section of foam and create a slot with 45-degree angles facing downwards, and glued in a strip of stock aluminum to act as a platform to place a 12-volt LED strip upon. This would face the light upwards, so that the only light coming down into the piece would be indirectly reflected off the angled faces in that slot, thus creating a diffused, ethereal, dim glow inside the hallway. I turned off all the lights in my shop except the LED strip and did a test to make sure the dreamlike nature of my piece was still intact. Then I moved on to the finishing touch. I gathered some toothpicks and began strategically bundling them with masking tape until what resulted was the semblance of an unnatural carpal bone structure. I then wrapped the structure entirely in masking tape as a skin. Once the alien's epidermis is on, you can carefully break the toothpick bones wherever you feel joints should occur and bend the armature into whatever crooked shape seems best to you. I used some pins to poke holes near the tops of the fingers, trimmed some thinly gauged wire, and glued one end of the wire into the holes. The other ends were twisted and bent into place. I cut some strips of masking tape to glue into place and act as tendon placeholders. I did this to the rest of the phalanges and then cut off the heads of nails and glued them into place to act as knuckles. To bring it all together, I mixed up some Mod Podge and water, pre-coated the armature with it, and then laid a square of toilet paper onto the wet armature and progressively added the same mixture to glue and shrink it down onto the armature while removing what was not needed and encouraging what was there into place with a wet brush. Once dried, the shrinkage of the glue in the toilet paper makes for a fabulously gnarly texture that I painted over with flat black paint. The resulting effect is a pretty creepy 1/6 scale alien hand that I made 2 of. I placed in the crack between the airlock doors to look like they were trying to find the light switch. I finished unpacking and playing with Buzz and Socks to find a candid and innocent enough pose to place them in. My goal was for our selfless hero and his sidekick to be blissfully unaware of the potential danger on LV-426. All they knew was someone needed help, and they came willing and ready to assist. What do you think? Could Buzz and Socks take on a Xenomorph? In my dreams, I know he can, because Buzz knows what matters in life is not a lack of knowledge or a wealth of knowledge, but what you do with the knowledge that you possess. Wisdom will ultimately defeat ignorance. Experience and knowledge will always be coming at you, and you'll never be truly satiated. There's always something new to learn, and I hope you learned something new today. Regardless, by maintaining a humble perception of self and accepting the realities around us that we simply cannot control, with a good attitude, it can actually give anyone the courage to stand up to evil, face real fear, and defeat it one step at a time. So don't be afraid to be honest with yourself about what you fear. And don't be too proud to seek help. If we pretend the monsters are not there, that doesn't make them go away. It's only when we accept that they really exist can we see them clearly and discover how to defeat them. If you haven't yet, I hope you face your monsters. I hope you enjoyed this diorama tutorial and going on this little trip down nostalgia lane with my own memories that I had forgotten about until I actually started building this diorama. It was a lot of fun to do. I've actually always wanted to do a space station like this. I've done smaller things like this, but nothing this specific. So I hope you enjoyed it. I have an entire store linked below with things that I've made. Hopefully you'll check it out. Maybe there's something that interests you. Either way, feel free to ask questions in the comments below. Thanks for coming by. I hope you enjoy the video. I hope you enjoy my stories, and we'll see you later.